Welcome to the Lost Boys to Found Fathers podcast. I'm Gabriel O'Sullivan. This is my co-host, Will Haycox. We are men who have suffered the loss of a child or children, and this podcast exists to help our fellow brothers who have traveled a same or similar journey. So, good morning, Will.
Good morning, Gabe.
We are moving on with this series about leading our children well. So this is episode 2. If you hadn't listened to the first episode, make sure you go back on all your podcast platforms or the YouTube and check that out. Now, last week we talked about how we could be an encourager and a comforter to our children, and we're going to kind of continue in that same vein today with a different verse, couple verses. The first one's Ephesians 4, 1 through 2, and listen, man, I'm kind of ripping these things out of context here, okay? So this was actually, written to the church at Ephesus, and it was talking about how they should relate to one another as a church, okay? But in reality, like we're leading our family, and we're leading our family, not only as a group of people that love each other, but as an organization. And this is the way that we want to treat and help that organization to be healthy. And so I'm going to go ahead and read that. It says, "As a prisoner for the Lord, then I urge you to live a life worthy of the calling you have received." We could probably spend all day right there on that. And the verse 2 says, "Be completely humble and gentle. Be patient, bearing with one another in love." So, man, I just thought, wow, yeah, that might be talking to the church collectively, but boy, that sure does speak to me as a dad. And so why don't you expound on that a little bit, man, and tell me how does that verse relate to us as being fathers that lead our children well?
Yeah, I mean, to your point, like we never want to take anything out of context in the Bible, but any verse that tells us how to live, how to act, how to love. I think, I don't know, I want to say you don't have to care about the context, but the lesson is still true. Being Christ-like is true regardless of where you get it in the Bible. So yeah, I think I agree with you there. Context is a key, but these are direct commands of how to be as Christians. So yeah, but I mean, to your point of how to apply this as a father, I mean, I'm a relatively new father compared to you, Gabe, and probably some other guys out there. That our son Gabriel was born would be like just over 4 years ago, and then Bonnie, our little girl, will be 3 in a couple of weeks. But I mean, I already can see for sure, like, the temptation not to be patient, temptation to not be humble, not be gentle, not to bear with a 2-year-old that's having a tantrum or just acting nuts. And I think those 2 verses together, like you said, is, we're living a life worthy of the calling we've received, and not to stretch this verse too far out of context, but other verses that we're going to get into that talk about being fathers and loving our children well. And the verse from last week, 1 Thessalonians 2, 11 and 12, talks about, it says, "We dealt with each of you as a father deals with his own children, being encouraging, comforting, and urging you to live lives worthy of God." So there's that same idea in this verse here, that we're living lives worthy of the calling we've received. And along with that is being humble, gentle, patient, and bearing with one another in love. So I think that, I'll let you jump in here too, but I think the overarching way that I would apply that to being a father is, I guess being humble and gentle kind of encapsulates the other two. That when you're humble and gentle, you're not impatient, you're not unloving, you are willing to deal with, in my case, a 2.5-year-old that is just crazy, and she wants to put on a princess dress, or she wants to eat a snack, even though mama said she can't have a snack, or the latest thing she's been on the last few months is mama or daddy, most of the time it's mama, has to get her dressed, or open a packet of goldfish for her, or hand her water even though it's like within her arm's reach. And if I hand it to her, it's like I might as well have smacked her in the face and screamed at her. Like, she just loses it. She's like, no, mommy, get it. Or you give her pacifier and she she's like, no, mommy get it. She'll take the passy and throw it across the room. And it's like, your first response is like, no, we don't do that. We are not going to, treat mama or daddy that way. We're not going to act like, a hooligan and get what we want by violently reacting to, daddy kissed me and I wanted mama to kiss me, so I'm going to push him away and scream. And I think being humble and gentle and patient in that moment is understanding, which I don't always do. She's 2 years old. She's about to be 3 years old. Her brain isn't developed to the point where she can be like, I really wish that mom would have given me that pacifier, Dad. But because you did, it hurt my feelings because it wasn't what I was expecting. Therefore, I responded negatively. Like her response is just, no, get this passy out of here. I'm going to scream or I'm going to lay on the floor and have a tantrum. So I'll let you throw in context for some older kids, but I think just to start off there, like reminding yourself, Christ is humble, gentle, patient, and bears with us in love and has since the beginning of time, that we've done a whole lot worse things to him and hurt his image and what he's given us and the covenants that man has made with God and then broken almost immediately. And it's not like we just threw a pacifier across the room. We've gone and collectively as humans, we've worshipped other gods, me and other people here that live in the world today. We prize money or power or any number of things over honoring the Lord. And still he bears with us, he's patient. And I think modeling that is something that is easy to forget as a father.
Yeah, man. And I'll give you some examples. You gave some examples of dealing with stuff with some younger kids. And first of all, when you're done with the pacifier, that's going to be a great thing for you, because when she freaks out and throws that thing across the room, you're like, oh, you don't want it anymore. Okay, it's going bye right now. And then there'll be some weeping and gnashing of teeth, bro, like for a day or two. And then she'll be like, oh, what's that? She'll totally forget about it. So
I wish
that it's one day it's gonna be a rough couple of days. It's kind of like when they were when the kids wouldn't want to sleep through the night, and then you would have to let them cry it out for about a night or two, and then it was like, oh, they're not gonna come get me. Okay, I'm just gonna go to sleep now. It was a rough 2 nights, but then after that it was great.
I understand.
So when it says be completely humble and gentle, that first part makes me think about like when our kids, even older kids, when they will throw some shade your way as a parent, right? Disrespect you, give you an attitude, give you an eye, say some things negatively to you, or just ignore a command or something that you've told them to do, right? Like you're like, hey, whatever, go pick up your room, and instead they keep playing, ball or whatever. As a father, it's easy to let that pride kind of well up and be like, you will, old South Park, you will respect my authority, right? Yeah. Remember that, Kenny? And so to get like that, okay, and that is not completely humble and gentle. That is saying, like, yes, we do respect? Should we demand respect? Yes, but can we do it also in a humble and gentle way, where we're not like rising up like this authoritarian and like coming down with the hammer of the gods, and letting them feel our wrath of like our voice or our tone or our countenance. And listen, I'm preaching to the choir right here, because I have allowed my pride to then get in the way of my proper interaction, with my kids. So when I read these verses, it's like very convicting, right? Of like, man, you really had episodes in your life where you got it right, like you did it by the book, meaning the Bible, the book. But then I've also had a lot of times where I have allowed that pride to well up in me to a point that I like explode like a volcano in my reaction, and in the way that I might raise my voice or try to be too, I would say, intimidating potentially. To my children in a not in a physical manner, but in a
I'm dad.
I'm dad. You're gonna listen to me, right? Yeah. Absolutely. Like listen to the thunder of my voice and respond. You lowly child. And I don't want to be like that, man.
Yeah. I mean, you brought something up, and I think this is a good tangent to go down. Like when we have that moment where, the child, and I did do the same thing even with when she was 2, now she's almost 3. And even with like my dogs, it's silly, comparison, but like when you're like, say all day long you're working, not that you get disrespected all day long at work every day, but things don't always go the way you want them to go when you're with another adult,
sure,
or multiple adults, or whatever. So I think there's probably like some element, some psychological thing where you want power, you want control. There's certain situations where you expect that you're in control, and when your child just looks at you and says, no, I'm not going to do what you tell me to do, you do respond with like, who are you to not do what I tell you to do? I'm going to, force you to do this, or I'm going to punish you for not doing it. And I think, like you said, there is a place, and biblically there is a place where we're given authority over our children, and we are to make wise decisions and guide them to do the right thing. And the Bible even talks about God, that corrects and steers and punishes those he loves. So there's nothing unbiblical about that. But I think what I know I'm tempted to do, and I just thought about it when you said that, so you can see if you feel the same way, Gabe, is like when we get into those moments, like I think the mindset is the problem. Like where is it coming from? Is it coming from God gave me this authority and I only have this authority over my child because God gave it to me and he has authority over me as his child? And so what I really want in this moment is for my child to obey me out of a love for God and submission to Christ, respect for him, and that creates a respect for me. And the only thing I'm trying to get out of this situation is to teach my child a lesson about God's love and God's fatherhood, so that in their future life will be good and they will have a good relationship with the Lord and submit to him. Or are we doing what I do most of the time, where it's like you impugn my pride, you try to step outside my authority, and I'm going to punish you for insulting or not respecting me, not for, oh, you've stepped outside of God's boundary. It's not, we're not like filled with a righteous anger because God's been disrespected. We're filled with that unrighteous anger of you stepped on my toes. And I think I think there's probably something in men that we do want the respect that we think we are deserved, and we especially think that we need that from our kids, and then responding in frustration, or like you said, yelling or deepening our voice or whatever it is, I think is, you need to step back maybe after you've blown up on your kids, if that's something that you do frequently, and just be like, hey, why did I do that? Is it because I wanted them to honor the Lord and I was mad about something that the Lord's mad about, or did I just want to be strong and want them to listen to me? So I think, and I would say too, the opposite.
No, I love that.
This verse says.
Two things that makes me think of this book called "Shepherding Your Child's Heart." Highly recommend that anybody listening go buy the book and read it. If you're a father, young father, old father, whatever, like read it. It is, well, I won't say old, meaning like if your kids are adult, don't read the book because it's a waste of your time. If you got kids that are in that toddler age or almost a toddler age, or or up, like even into their elementary age, read that book. Like I can't remember, it's Dude Tripp something or another.
David Tripp, so him.
I don't remember, maybe I can't remember, but it's called Shepherding Your Child's Heart or Shepherding a Child's Heart. But definitely the most impactful book I read about parenting, and other than the Bible we're reading right here. But man, he talks about just what you said, that our goal is to show our kids Christ as a parent, and then our goal is to help them understand that we are like a liaison between them and the Lord, and that their respect for us is showing their respect for the Lord. And if they learn to respect their parent, then they're going to learn to respect God, which means they're going to get blessings in life and not, have a lot of consequences or punishment. Now, obviously, we're not here to talk about that necessarily today. We've covered those blessings and consequences, or blessings and punishment, or chastisement, and like lessons learned, and like God, using, as we talked about last week, wind sprints to teach us a lesson, versus like showering us with money to teach, there's all that. But so when I get it right, is when I come to my kids kindly and gently and humbly, firmly, sure, and I'm like, I have a conversation with them like, okay, listen, the reason you're going to get disciplined right now is because you were you're disrespectful to mom, or because you didn't do what I asked you to do and you completely ignored me and just kept doing your own thing, and that's not okay. So that's not okay, because the way that you're reacting towards me is also a way that you could react towards the Lord later in your life if you ignore his call on you, if you ignore the way that what he's telling you or asking you to do, and if you go outside his will. That's just not going to go great for you, because God wants you to listen to him, obey him, and to trust him. I was like, so by you displaying those things negatively towards me, then you might develop a habit of treating the Lord in that same way, and that's not good. So as your parent, I have to make sure that you respect me in the home, but also I'm helping to teach you how to respect God. Okay, and so now you're going to get your punishment. And then when I've modeled that appropriately, you're cool, you're calm, you're collected, right? You're having that conversation with them. And when I just think about this a couple years ago, like that, I did not model that appropriately with my 5-year-old, and just was like, he did something or whatever, and was angry, and I, disciplined him. And then he was like, Daddy. I was like, what? He was like, you didn't stop and tell me about why I was getting punished, and you also didn't pray with me afterwards, because that's what he talks about in his book. He says after you have that time, then you actually sit with your kid and you pray with them, and you pray for them, and you pray for their forgiveness. If they haven't trusted Christ yet, you pray for them that God would forgive them, and let them know you're going to forgive them, and that you're going to help them, to help them to do better next time. And man, he called me out on it. He was like 5 at the time, and I was like, man, like, dude, out of the mouth of babes, right? Like, he called me out on it. So sorry, that was a long soliloquy, but to your second point, when we know that we've screwed up, we got to go back to our kids and apologize. But listen, man, hey, I did not handle that the correct way. I shouldn't have raised my voice in a harsh way with you. There's a difference between firmness and harshness. I screwed up. Please forgive me. Right, and this is the way I should have done it. I love you. I'm sorry that I was a bad example to you. I'm going to try to do better next time. I'm not perfect either, right? Like, you screw up, I screw up. You may not use that term. You mess up, I mess up. Okay, and I just want to ask your forgiveness for that. I think being big enough to show that is helpful too.
Yeah, and we could keep going on this one, but I think you've got another verse that you wanted to throw in here.
Let's just finish this one up, so we can, and then So we'll get into Ephesians 6:4 next time. But the second part of this verse is, be patient, bearing with one another in love. So let's just flesh that out for the next 2 minutes. Like, how does that apply to what we've been talking about?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's several ways it could apply, but I think the easiest thing to say about that is, understanding that our kids are where they are. And my kid is 3 and yours are older than that, but knowing you've got an older teenager and then you've got younger kids, I think knowing where our kids are in life and having some patience for that, and not expecting a 3-year-old to act like a 25-year-old, not expecting a 10-year-old to act like a 25-year-old, and having some grace, with everything that we've just said about the rightness of an authority structure. And we are owed respect as parents, as fathers, just like we owe respect to the Lord, knowing that, hey, they're not perfect, like I'm not perfect, and they're not always going to give me respect. So even though I've established this structure of I give respect to the Lord, they give respect to me, it goes from there. We're patient with them when they screw up. And, like you said, having a good pattern of going to them and saying, this is what I asked you to do. This is what you didn't do. And this is how you responded. And this is why you're going to be punished now. This is how you're going to be punished if it's a spanking, if it's, whatever, taking away toys, or you can't go do this thing that you wanted to do. Explaining that well and making sure that they understand. I think bearing with one another in love is even being loving when we're punishing them, and not saying, okay, Daddy loves you. It's like if people see God as like, God loves you, he provides for you, and he cares for you, and he's there when you're suffering. But when you screw up, he's just going to throw a lightning bolt down and, blow your life up.
Yeah.
Like God doesn't respond in anger every time we screw up. Like, we know God has wrath, and he's going to pour out that wrath one day, and it's holy wrath, but he doesn't lash out every single time we do something that's frustrating.
That's right.
He bears with us in love.
Yes.
When, like,
do you read the Old Testament, right?
Yeah. I mean, the whole story of the Old Testament,
yeah.
And my testimony, that if you go back to whatever that was, like the second episode or third episode, I tell some of my testimony where I grew up in church, and then I went about as far as I could get away from church when I was in college, and God didn't like smite me or send some person to beat me up and drag me into church or whatever. Like, there's all these different ways he could have carried out his wrath and forced me back to respecting him and coming back to him and loving him, being drug in by my hair and, hey, you're gonna worship me now.
Yeah.
And instead, he bore with me in love. He was patient, and obviously you could say God knows the future. He knows our future and what's going to happen. But I think modeling that when our kids screw up, we are patient, and that's not to say we let them go off the rails because, hey, we love them and we're going to bear with their mistakes right now.
Yeah.
But we understand kids are going to make dumb mistakes, and 3-year-old mistakes aren't the same as 10-year-old mistakes, aren't the same as 16, 17, 23-year-old, whatever mistakes. But having that loving method of discipline, that loving correction where you can counsel them, like you said, you can tell them, this is what you did wrong, this is what the Bible says, this is what Mom and Daddy want you to do, and here are the consequences, but I still love you.
Yeah.
And I will continue to love you, and to lay that out in a loving way. And I think it takes a lot of discipline. Maybe we can cover that in another episode, like how to do these things. But, you got to have a relationship with the Lord that is strong enough that in that moment when the child rebels against you, your response is not, you better stop what you're doing right now, like, quit crying, I'll give you something to cry about, or, I'm going to drag you in this room and spank you until you can't sit down for a week. And, like, none of those things are what the Lord does to us. And I think balancing that good, godly desire to discipline your children and this sinful, fleshly pride to just be obeyed because we're in charge is something that we're just going to have to submit to the Spirit and let him lead us to love our children well.
I love it, man. Yeah. And we're going to kind of pause this episode, and we'll jump back into some more scripture and some more life lessons to go along with that about how to lead our kids well. And I love what you just said. So remember, be completely humble and gentle. Be patient, bearing with one another in love. And listen, that's the way God's treated us. So we want to model that same love, that same patience, that same gentleness, that same humbleness to our children as well. So thank y'all for joining us today. Remember to check out us on the Webternet, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Lost Boys to Found Fathers. Check us out there. If you're looking for my books, if you don't mind, love for you to check them out. Thy Will Be Done, Trusting God in the Midst of Suffering, Pain, or Loss. That can be found on Amazon. Or Every Little Thing, 6 Small Steps to Perfect Peace. That can be found on Amazon, on Apple Books, on BarnesandNoble.com, and on ChristianBook.com. So thanks for joining us today. Let's not be lost. Let's be found in Him.